video is about Sam Houston and his life, especially as it relates to Texas. So in this image, even you can see kind of some of the most important people. We've got Santa Anna, kind of his chief rival for a brief period of his life. We've got Juan Seguin, who is involved in the Battle of San Jacinto with him. We've got Stephen F. Austin, the father of Texas. And then over here, very far in the background, you have Andrew Jackson, who is kind of a mentor to Sam Houston in his early life. And they had some similarities, although also some differences. The main similarity between the two of them being they're both being strong unionists in favor of the United States and not separation from the Union. So Sam Houston's early life, this is a picture of Sam Houston in his younger days, not a less common picture, but probably much closer to what he actually looked like, especially during his time as, during the early days of the Texas Revolution. So he was born on March 2nd, 1793, which is interesting because it's also the day, March 2nd is also the day that Texas declares independence. His father died when he was only 14. Shortly after that, his family moves to Tennessee. But just a couple of years later after that, he kind of runs away from home and ends up living with the Cherokee for about 3 years. Not like necessarily solid the full 3 years. It didn't mean he didn't return home at all during that time, but lives with the Cherokee and is given the name of Raven by the Cherokee there. And that is kind of really the beginning of a relationship with the Native Americans that is unique to many of the white leaders of the United States and within the United States at this time. Most did not have the kind of relationship that Sam Houston did with the Native Americans. Now a few others did as well, but Sam Houston was certainly unique in that. He fights in the War of 1812, served under Andrew Jackson during that time. That's really where he meets Andrew Jackson and becomes his protege. He is elected to Congress from Tennessee in 1823, serves 2 terms, and then is elected governor of Tennessee in 1827. But is married at that time, but that marriage is fraught with difficulties from the very beginning, and leaves it kind of disgraced, leaves the governorship and then goes to Arkansas to avoid the family problems with his wife, and perhaps does so perhaps in an effort to kind of save her honor and to be able to treat her a little more honorably, although that is certainly disputed, not a for certain accepted reality. Exactly what was going on there, nobody really knows. There's a lot of conjecture. During that time, so he goes to Arkansas and lives with the Cherokee again, and then marries a Cherokee woman and stays there for a few years, for about 3 years with the Cherokee. And then in 1832, he goes to Texas. And his move to Texas in 1832, he is almost immediately a voice for secession from Mexico. Some say he actually goes there with the plan to try to get Texas separated from Mexico. We don't know that for sure, but it's certainly possible. He is supportive of that. In 1836, at the convention of 1836, he is given command of the Texian army, and it is his strategic retreat from Santa Anna after the Alamo. Obviously, Sam Houston's not at the Alamo. The people there died, but he's got the rest of the Texian army. He's able to build it up a little bit and avoid Santa Anna as long as possible until he can really get to that the place he wants to fight. He wants to pick the time and the place of attack, and he's going to look for the best opportunity. And as we talk about with the Battle of San Jacinto, once Santa Anna divides up his troops, splits his forces, and then ends up in a bad location, Sam Houston takes advantage of that, and he becomes the victor and the hero of the Battle of San Jacinto. This really propels him forward, although he clearly had a lot of experience in government already from Tennessee, and so he steps in and is a natural, obvious choice to continue to be one of the main leaders of Texas. if not the main leader of Texas. Stephen F. Austin never really steps into that role the way Sam Houston does, although he certainly wants to be, but doesn't ever gain that. And Stephen F. Austin will kind of fades away. And then, unfortunately, for Stephen F. Austin, dies fairly quickly soon after Texas gains independence. So now we have the Republic of Texas, and Sam Houston is elected the first president of the Republic of Texas. He serves 2 terms in the Republic of Texas Constitution. You cannot serve consecutive terms, so one right after the other. So he serves as president from 1836 to 1838. And then Mirabeau Lamar, kind of his rival, his main rival. They don't really get along. They have different ways of doing things and different opinions on how things should be handled, is elected after Sam Houston, and then Sam Houston is reelected. His kind of main policies and ways of doing things, he favored annexation by the United States and worked for that to happen through different means. He made peace with Native Americans. That was his goal, especially those that were still within Texas border. And he was able to avoid further war with Mexico. And so those are kind of some of his goals and what he's able to accomplish and the things that he supports during his time as president of Texas. In the interim time period, it's not in the notes, but he actually serves in the Texas House of Representatives between being the president of Texas. Once Texas becomes a state, he is elected one of the 2 senators from the state of Texas and serves as senator from 1846 to 1859. And he is an ardent unionist. He is first and foremost in favor of staying in the Union. We've gained the Union, we've become a part of the United States, and he wants to remain so. He opposed emancipation of slaves. So he was a slave owner himself. He didn't shy away from that. He opposed emancipating or freeing the slaves, but he also opposed expanding slavery into new territories. He votes against those kinds of. He's in favor of the Compromise of 1850 in certain ways that limits the expansion of slavery. He is opposed to the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which is supported by most Southern slave owners, and opposes secession. As the Civil War gets closer and closer, he is not in favor of secession. Because of that and his kind of stances, he loses and is no longer senator from Texas, but he is able to be elected governor of Texas. The state legislature at that time is the ones that elected who was your senator, not the people of Texas. So the state legislature does not re-elect him as senator from Texas, but he is still popular enough within the state of Texas as the hero of the Revolution and just a well-recognized name that he is elected governor in 1859. He first ran in 1857 when he realized he was not going to be chosen as a senator again. He loses that election but wins in 1859. He refuses. So then when Lincoln is elected and many of the southern states begin to secede from the Union and leave the United States, he says we shouldn't do it. Ultimately, Texas convention votes to leave the Union and join the Confederacy, and he could have stayed in power if he, as governor of Texas, had he sworn an oath of loyalty to the Confederacy, but he refuses to do so. And because of that refusal, the Texas Convention removes him from office in March of 1861. He goes to his home in Huntsville, Texas. Really disappointed that the state that he fought to make a independent country and then work tirelessly to bring into the Union of the United States has left, and he dies just 2 years later in 1863 in the middle of the Civil War still. And so those are kind of some of the big highlights of his career as a politician. It doesn't go into a lot of his personal life or anything like that, but those are the highlights and just an overview of Sam Houston and all that he accomplished as a as a leader in Texas and also in Tennessee.